Okay, here on a Friday morning, Ted Cruz was out there. Of course, he's the big Tea Party guy, right? The senator from Texas. And he's saying, you know what? We got to repeal every single word of Obamacare. Forget about going in there and trying to fix some of it and trying to go in there and work with the more kind of sort of extreme elements of the legislation. He wants to repeal every single word of it.
And, we all agree with this. I mean, we all want to get rid of this on the right. But here's my problem with what Ted Cruz does. He says these sorts of things, and then he follows up with, and we can do it. How? I mean, because what that does is that creates an artificial schism in the Republican Party.
And it sort of raises expectations of the Republican voters, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And then it sort of implies that if we can do it right now, who's the great obstacle? Other Republicans, right? Because if we can do it right now, the obstacle is not Democrats. The obstacle is Republicans. Mitch McConnell has said, and he's gotten raked over the coals for this, we can't repeal Obamacare until we get a Republican Senate and a Republican president, which is accurate. You're not going to repeal the entirety of Obamacare. It's like saying we're going to repeal the entirety of, for example, the Great Society legislation. Well, LBJ is still president, right? It's not going to happen. You can't do that until you actually have some sort of political control. And oddly enough, because of this, it's actually creating less of a chance that Republicans will, in the end, have enough control to be able to actually do anything. Because what it means is that for Ted Cruz, every hill is a hill to die on, but not for him to die on, for the party to die on, so that he can be the guy who stands up and says,
he comes out on top.
I was willing to stand up to power. I was willing to stand up to the rest of the Republicans. I love what he says. I'm not a big fan of how he says it.
Our number is 855-785-8255. Do you think it's a mistake for Senator Ted Cruz to sort of raise the bar here with statements about repealing every single word of Obamacare? Here's what the senator from Texas had to say.
As a result of millions of Americans rising up, we are making the case to the American people. And let me tell you right now, I am absolutely convinced we are going to repeal every single word of Obamacare.
Wow, they had the music playing them out?
Yeah, the music. Yeah, play them out. What does that mean, play us out? But you know what?
He said those remarks yesterday at the 5th anniversary of the Tea Party, kind of like a rally that they had. Yeah. Senator Mike Lee, Mark Levin, Michelle Bachmann were there as well. And I really do agree. I like Ted Cruz, but I've heard things from him from the right, people on the right and friends of mine on the right and the left, that he's definitely more about like what looks good for Ted versus what looks good for the party or maybe conservatism as a whole. And I think we have this audio clip of him playing the word game with a Politico reporter.
Yeah.
And I think that his answer about Mitch McConnell, and if you see the video of it, kind of like the snark that you can see in his face, is very revealing because he's asked about even a couple of people that would be his contender, or like he'd have to fight against for the nomination in 2016.
Yeah, but get to this here in a second. I just want to say quickly, I think one of the basic rules about politics, I think it's wise to not make promises that you know you can't keep. I mean, I remember former President Bush, the first one, read my lips. He knew he couldn't keep that promise. Mm-hmm. No new taxes. They'll push me, and I'll say no. They'll push me a little more, and I'll say, read my lips. And that sunk him. He made a promise he couldn't keep.
Well, here's the problem. Ted Cruz is actually making a promise that no individual can keep. He's making a promise the party can't keep. Mm-hmm. And that's bigger, but that's more of a problem. When George H.W. Bush made a promise that he wouldn't raise taxes, and then he did, you know who we punished? George H.W. Bush.
Yeah, he lost his job.
When Ted Cruz makes a promise that the Republican Party can repeal Obamacare today, and then they don't do it, the entire Republican Party gets labeled with Ted Cruz's promise, which is what he knows that. He knows that other Republicans are going to be blamed. He's going to be seen as the guy who stood up to the Republican establishment and said what
but just couldn't get the rest to follow him.
Exactly.
Right.
So he's a
martyr.
Correct. He set himself up for a win-win, and he said that's the truth of the government shutdown. It's the truth of the debt ceiling. It's what I object to in all of this because, look, we all agree. I mean, Mitch McConnell and John McCain. I don't like John McCain. John McCain agrees Obamacare is terrible and would vote to repeal it in a heartbeat. And John McCain is horrible, right? There are plenty. Lindsey Graham is not my favorite senator. He would vote to repeal Obamacare in a heartbeat. They would all vote to repeal Obamacare. In fact, the House has voted 35 times to repeal Obamacare at this point. Somehow it's not happening. Why isn't this magically not happening? Well, because when you don't have the governing power, you can't actually do it. Oh, it's like if Obama goes out there and he says, we can today, the Democratic Party, has the power today to pass a full nationalized health care regime. No, you don't, dude, because you don't control the House. Yep. And that's why you don't see Obama say that sort of stuff. Instead, what he says is Those Republicans are the
and
obstacle.
he points the finger at them,
right?
yeah.
So why isn't Ted Cruz pointing the finger instead of saying we have the ability to do it today? Because Ted Cruz's actual political strategy is to take over the Republican Party, not to fight the Democratic Party.
Here is Ted Cruz, who is, of course, in the Ted Cruz business, playing that round of word association that Alicia mentioned a moment ago.
Senator, we're going to do a rapid round. I'm going to say a name, and you're going to say the first word that comes to your mind. George W. Bush.
Strategery.
That's fine.
Karl Rove.
Strategery.
Barack Obama.
Non-strategery. Imperial.
Ted.
Joe Biden.
Crazy Uncle Joe.
That's what we
what we
call him.
say.
Hey, wait a minute. We call him Crazy Uncle
I
Joe.
know.
Everybody calls him crazy. And by the way, Joe Biden, there's a long profile of him in Politico, and it's about as ridiculous as you would suggest. It's the self-aggrandizing thing about how he is just a genius, and he's actually been the architect of all Obama administration policies.
Is it at all revealing, though?
It's revealing in how delusional he is. But he actually, there's one point in the article where he actually calls himself, he says, when I used to, run interference for Hillary with the president, he called himself Hillary's Obama whisperer. As though Hillary couldn't understand Obama and he had to translate Obama.
He's really framing this campaign for 2016, isn't he?
Oh yeah, no. He says he says that Obama made him the last person in the room on any major decision. So he's trying to take credit for everything. You know what he's setting himself up for? Honestly, back in 1960, when Dwight Eisenhower's successor, supposed successor, VP Richard Nixon, was running for office, Dwight Eisenhower was asked at a press conference what major decisions was Richard Nixon involved in. And Eisenhower in a press conference basically kind of sat there for 2 minutes. And
couldn't come up with an answer.
And he kind of went, eh. Yeah. And Nixon was always super pissed at him because he had been involved in some major decisions. Biden is setting himself up for that because Biden is going to say, okay, they're going to ask President Obama, who was more involved in making your administration's decisions, Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton?
And he's not going to be comfortable answering.
Correct. And then Joe Biden is going to feel that he's been
thrown under the bus.
over. And by the way, they did think apparently about throwing him off the campaign in 2012 after he did the whole gay marriage thing where he came out in front of President Obama.
Right.
And Obama was supposed to make his big announcement and Biden blew it. Apparently, they removed him from all the campaign meetings for the remainder of the campaign.
And I really think that Biden is kind of trying to make a move that to the left of maybe even Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. But I think the word association game continued with Ted Cruz in this Politico reporter. And it was interesting because he kind of went after a couple of Republicans in a way.
Misguided.
Chris Christie.
Fat. Huh? What?
Brash.
Rand Paul.
Liberty loving.
Mitch McConnell.
Freedom lover.
Leader.
Ooh. That's a statement of fact.
That is what is stenciled on his door.
Theodore.
Whoa.
Wow, that is what's stenciled on his door. But what's stenciled on the door ain't what you always are.
And, well, that was definitely
the implication there. Wow. Ooh, wow. Ted Cruz, he's trying to make enemies, I think.
Obnoxious.
You look shocked, Ben.
Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
Obnoxious.
Yeah, right.
I know. I mean, really. I mean, that's obnoxious. I'm sorry, but if you're going to go
after,
it's
a little disrespectful.
It's certainly disloyal.
And also, it's not going to help you get your agenda. If your agenda is more conservative and you need to win over the minority leader, then maybe you shouldn't be snarky about him.
And to say that, well, Mitch McConnell is in a real heated campaign for his job as well.
Well, and Ted Cruz knows that McConnell's in a heated campaign for his job. Look, if he wants to rip Mitch McConnell, have the guts to go out there and just rip Mitch McConnell. Really, this kind of passive-aggressive.
Right, don't be snarky and tell us that's what's stenciled on his door. Tell us why he's not a real leader, if that's what you really want to say.
You want to go after him, go after him. And tell us why a guy who has a 100% rating from the American Conservative Union isn't conservative enough for you.
As we continue on The Morning Answer here on a Friday morning with the rain coming down.
I'm really interested to hear the traffic report.
You got us coming in a flash here. As we continue, a court decision, controversial, says schools can remove students who are wearing a T-shirt with the American flag emblazoned on it. It's kind of odd. It's 8:20.